Hello everyone, my name is John Fredrickson, and today I will be interviewing a great and amazing author named Richard Mouse. He wrote a book called The Lucky One. And today we will be conducting a pretty good interview with him, and I hope you all enjoy it. And let's just get right into it, and I hope you all enjoy.
First of all, Richard, what was your biggest inspiration to write this book?
My biggest inspiration to write this book was to tell the story. All my life I wished I could tell the story, because everybody I knew, whether it's classmates, brothers and sisters, parents, everybody that I dealt with did not know the story. And I knew the story, and I had this urge to want to tell them. Nobody in our family ever talked about it. When I came back from the hospital many times and go back to school, nobody ever asked me what happened there. What did you do while you were gone? It's just, oh, you're back, okay. So I had this urge to want to tell the story all my life.
The next question we have is, right off the bat, do you remember the number of surgeries, operations that you had on your leg for polio?
I had a total of 16 different, I'll call them procedures. There were once or twice, I know one time in particular, I went to the operating room and they did a procedure where they stuck a stick with some disinfectant on the end of the stick into my ankle to the inside to help get rid of an infection. But I wasn't totally asleep, so I could feel some pain. But 14 trips to the operating room were actual surgeries.
Wow. Okay then. Do you also remember the main doctor's name that was in charge of the operations?
My doctor was Dr. Babb, B-A-B-B, Dr. Babb.
What was your life like as a child while you had polio then?
Well, just to give you an example, a couple months after I got polio, when I was less than a year old, I was placed into the hospital because they had to put splints on my ankle because my leg was starting to grow and pulling the front of the foot down. So they had to put splints on to keep trying to hold the front of the foot up to lengthen the heel cord. And I was in the hospital almost a year at that time, just with splints on my feet, no surgery or nothing. But I was in a isolation ward because they didn't know how long I could transmit polio or if I was contagious. They didn't know. So since they were in doubt, they put me in an isolation ward, so all the nurses and doctors had masks on their face, and I basically spent a year like that.
How did you attain all the medical information and records that you were able to use to write your book?
After I retired, I was having a problem with my ankle, and I went to a doctor. Dr. Richard Owens is his name. He had polio himself as a youngster. He was an orthopedic surgeon, and he had braces on both legs. But I went to visit him, and one thing he said, he could get some medical records. So he contacted Gillette Hospital, and they sent him 30 pages of medical records, and he gave them to me at a subsequent visit. He gave them the records to me and said I had to return them to him, and he would then return them back to Gillette. But of course I made copies of them, so I had copies of those 30 pages. But the interesting thing was, not long after that, Minnesota state law changed so that they're obligated to give anybody their records if they just asked for it. In other words, any patient is entitled to get their medical records. And so then I contacted Gillette as I got serious about starting to write this book, and told them that I would like my records, and they said, which records? We got all your records. They've got all the records of every patient they ever had since the hospital was built. And I said, And they said it was a big, tall stack of records. They weren't sure they wanted to copy every page. And there's a lot of stuff in there I wasn't interested in, like what I ate on a certain day or something. So I said, go through and pick out all the records of all the surgeries and all the medical procedures and send me those, see what it looks like. And I got 120 pages then. And so that's what I used to put together all the quotes of medical records that are in the book, and got a nice accurate timeline of what was done when and all that.
Were you scared when you were first being administered to the hospital?
Oh yeah, the first time I can remember. My first surgery was at age 5, but amazingly, I do not remember going into the hospital or going into surgery or any of that early experience. I only have recollections of probably the last week before I came out. And I remember my aunt coming to get me. So I don't know if they were giving me tranquilizers every day and had me kind of half drugged up, so I was not aware of it. But I only remember of that stay, and I was in for about 3 months and had surgery. I don't remember anything of it until a week before I left the hospital. So I kind of, to this day, yet suspect that if they gave me a little tranquilizer every day, I would be kind of oblivious to what was going on, maybe. At least that's what I suspect. So the first time I really remember was at age 10, and yeah, I was scared. That was kind of a big deal. I was in a hospital and had a whole week to look around and watch nurses and patients, and a patient in my own room, the same room I was in, had surgery a couple days before I did, and I realized the day before I went in for surgery that he had the similar thing to what I had. And so I'm watching him recover from surgery and realized that's going to be me in a couple days. So yeah, I was scared. I was thinking about walking home, but they had put my clothes away somewhere. I didn't know where my clothes were, and I didn't want to walk home in my hospital gown with a diaper, so I kind of poo-pooed that idea, gave up on that because I didn't know where my clothes were. If they'd had my clothes in my room, in my closet, I probably would have. I was that scared.
Was it hard for you most of the time when you felt like you couldn't participate in school events because of your condition?
It was hard lots of times, yes. I can remember particularly a couple incidents. If you want to take time to talk about some specifics?
Only if you want to.
Oh, I can. One time I remember in about the 7th grade, I had surgery and I came back from the hospital and I was on crutches yet and going to school, and which meant that I could not participate with any of the games that my classmates were doing out on the playground. They were playing tag and playing ball and chasing each other and playing crack the whip and I don't know what all game, dodgeball. I couldn't participate with them in those games because I was on crutches. And if I went and sat just on the school step to watch, that was kind of boring. And then a lot of times maybe a 2nd or 3rd grader would walk up to me and ask me about what those crutches are. And I talked to them, so I could talk to somebody at least during recess, but I wasn't able to participate with my classmates. And then of course, by the time the recess is over and we all go back into school and now we go back to our classroom, the classmates were all doing things together so they could communicate and talk about what they did in recess and things like that. And I was never a part of that either because I wasn't with them during recess. So yeah, I really felt like an outsider a lot of times.
When did your fascination with airplanes start?
That fascination with airplanes, I think, it goes back as far as I can remember. Even as a young kid, I remember if I could hear an airplane playing with my siblings out in the lawn or something, or out in the pasture, or walking with my dog or whatever, if I could hear an airplane, I'd have to stop and look at it and watch it go over and go by until I couldn't see it anymore. Then I could continue with what I'm doing. I don't know if I thought that it would be awesome to be up in the sky compared to limping around on the ground, or what. I was just fascinated by airplanes, and I'd read in the hospital, I'd read books after World War II about airplanes and look at the pictures and read about flying in World War II. I don't know, I just picked up an interest in it that I thought, wouldn't it be great to be able to do that?
Was Ward 6 like a second home to you?
Oh, in a lot of ways, sure. I'd go home and be home for half a year or a year and go back to Ward 6, and it was mostly all the same staff and some of the same patients even. I'd say a lot of times I'd go back and a third of the patients were people that were there when I left. Some of them hadn't gone home at all, and some of them, like me, had gone home and were back again. But yeah, there's a lot of familiar faces. I knew the procedures, I knew the routines. I knew exactly what was going to happen. One time I had 3 weeks from the time I went back into the hospital to have surgery, and it took 3 weeks before they actually did the surgery. Then I found out later, this was 10 years ago, I found out at a reunion, that they had a policy that if the patient had a procedure that needed to be done in the hospital, that if it was going to be less than a month, they'd just keep you there. You know, it could be just, one time I was in for 2 weeks just to get a cast changed. In other words, if they were going to be a procedure and they knew it was going to be done in 20 days, they'd keep you there rather than let you go home and come back in 20 days. I didn't realize that at the time. I'd have screamed, holy hell, if I'd have known it at the time, but I only found out that later, luckily.
Yeah.
But that was kind of an evil policy, in my view. But that's how it was. That's what they did. Can you imagine now? Nowadays, a lot of people go in and have surgery and go home the same day. I went in for 2 weeks just to get a cast changed on my leg.
Yes, times have changed.
Yes.
How did that trombone work out for you?
Trombone?
Yes.
But actually, it turned out to be quite a good experience. I mentioned in the book that I thought it didn't, the first trombone, I took it home and thought it didn't work because I blew in it. Nothing happened. Blew again. I gave it to my dad. I don't think this works. We're going to have to get a different one. And my dad tried it and showed me that you have to vibrate your lips like that to make it work. And but it allowed me to be a part of something. I was in band, and after a year of being in band, we started marching. And by that time, my legs were good and strong, and didn't have any. That worked out okay, and I enjoyed the band. And yeah, but very, very. I look back. I have fond memories of the experience playing trombone in the band. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I would wish that on anybody. I wished every student could be in band.
Yeah, I always preferred the trumpet.
Did you?
That's what I was good at.
Okay, well, just pick any instrument you want, just some instrument, just play music, whether it's drums or trumpets or trombones, whatever. Just, I wish every kid, in fact, I think they should be required, just like some schools require all kids to have a foreign language. I think every kid should be required to take band for a few years, just, even if it's not a real good band, even if it's not the world's greatest, just be a part of a band, play music together. In other words, to learn how to function in a cooperative setting rather than a competitive setting. The football, the basketball, baseball, and most of the sports we play are quite competitive. In a band, it's more cooperative. You're seeing how good you can get doing something together.